Welcome, and thank you very much for joining me today or this evening. Welcome to the first class of a two-part series on Moshiach. Today's topic is Moshiach, a fantasy or reality? Why is Moshiach such a central theme in Judaism? Will be followed by a second talk, what to expect before and after Moshiach comes. A few weeks ago, I received a private message from a lady on my community WhatsApp group. It read, "Hi Fruma, hope you are well. All this talk about Moshiach has made me realize I know nil. In a nutshell, what will happen when Moshiach comes? How will we know? What will happen to us mere mortals? I don't expect an answer tonight or even tomorrow. How many people like me in the group don't understand this concept? I hope you don't mind me asking." So I wrote back, "I think it is amazing that you're asking. You have inspired me to further educate people about Moshiach. I think I will give a share about it online." So here I am. And I cannot think of a more appropriate day than today, the 28th day of Nisan, to talk about the concept of Moshiach. What is special about the 28th day of the month of Nisan? In 1956, the Lubavitcher Rebbe wrote a letter to Yitzchak ben Tzvi, who was at that time serving as a second president of Israel. In the letter, he wrote these words, "From the day I went to Cheder, and even before, the picture of the final redemption started forming in my mind. The Rebbe dreamed of a world of perfection, a world of Moshiach, a world in which we will not know pain or suffering, a world filled with the glory and light of Hashem himself, a world of pure holiness and goodness." At a ripe young age, he began to formulate this picture in his mind, and indeed in virtually every talk he gave, every letter he wrote, and directive he issued, he made reference to this goal. 40 years after assuming leadership and working tirelessly to turn this dream into a reality, by doing whatever he could to transform the perspective of world Jewry and the entire world, he passionately said these famous words while delivering a talk on the 28th of Nisan. "I have done all that I can to bring Moshiach. Now I leave it up to you." Hence, particularly for Chabad Hasidim, the 28th day of Nisan is a day to reflect upon this mandate. On this day, we ask ourselves, are we doing our part to bring Moshiach, to bring an awareness of Moshiach to the world? It is a day when we ask ourselves, do we really and truly believe with all our hearts in the coming of Moshiach? My little granddaughters have been preparing dances for Moshiach. In fact, they've chosen the clothes they will wear. Have we chosen our clothes? Spiritually, how would we behave differently if we knew that Moshiach would come today? Our individual appreciation of what will transpire, our ability to absorb the tremendous energy of Moshiach will be directly dependent upon our efforts and our mitzvot, on how we have prepared ourselves spiritually for this awesome period. Today is a day we ask ourselves, are we preparing ourselves and hastening the redemption by doing mitzvot with love and attention to detail and learning about Moshiach and concepts related to Moshiach, as the Rebbe instructed us to do a week after his plea on the 28th day of Nisan? The Rebbe clearly said, the more we learn about Moshiach, the more we will bring the reality of Moshiach into the world. Over the 30 years of being a community Rebbetzin, an emissary of the Rebbe, offering classes, I have often been asked, why do we at Chabad place so much emphasis on the coming of Moshiach? Why do I always throw the Moshiach concept into everything I talk about? There are 613 mitzvot in the Torah. We have so much to focus on in Judaism. It is such a rich religion filled with beautiful traditions and teachings. Why are we so obsessed with the coming of Moshiach? We can understand why the belief in God and the divinity of Torah and the prophets are basic pillars upon which the entire structure of Judaism stands. But why is believing in Moshiach considered to be one of those principles? Why is it so important to believe in him? Can Judaism not be practiced without this belief? I'm also asked, Why was the Lubavitcher Rebbe so obsessed with the coming of Moshiach? And I've heard this one many times. Jews have been talking about Moshiach for thousands of years. Just let Hashem bring Moshiach when he chooses to bring Moshiach, if he's actually coming. And we should focus on living a productive life, just making the most of our journey down on here on earth. Leave Moshiach to God, if and when he wills him to come. Besides which, if he hasn't come until now, and there have been so many opportunities for him to come, who says he's coming altogether? So questioning the centrality of Moshiach is actually not a new phenomenon. King David, the founder of the Davidic dynasty, from where Moshiach descends, was faced with those who mocked and scorned the concept of Moshiach and were cynical about his arrival. And he actually references this in Psalm 89, Cherfo ikvos Moshichecha, referring to those who have mocked the footsteps of God's anointed. Today, I would like to focus on the centrality of Moshiach in Jewish doctrine and belief, and explain why we are obsessed with Moshiach's coming. What are the implications of Moshiach on the world? What is our mission statement? What can we do to make Moshiach a reality in our lifetime, and why our active involvement is a key element to his arrival? So belief in the coming of Moshiach is fundamental to Torah and Jewish faith. His coming is often seen as an abstract theory, more so than a practical issue. Indeed, there's a lot of apprehension that surrounds this subject, partly fed by an innate fear of the unknown, the mystery of a hidden future, and partly by painful memories and disappointment. I heard recently that the Kloisenberger Rebbe, who survived the concentration camp, said that he never shed a tear in the camps. He never cried. But when the Americans came to liberate him, he cried, because never in his wildest dreams did he ever think anyone other than Moshiach would come to liberate them. The sad consequences of messianic misadventures of the past, such as the unfortunate history of pseudo-Moshiachs, left a trail of painful disillusion and dismay for many. On the other hand, precisely in times of great trials and tribulations, which are overabundant, unfortunately, in Jewish history, it is the belief in Moshiach and redemption that kindles a spark of hope during periods of unimaginable persecution and suffering that the Jewish people have drawn solace from the anticipation of the Messianic age, when good will triumph over evil and the world will enter a utopian era where truth, peace, and universal brotherhood will reign supreme. Jewish leaders of all times and from all strains of Judaism implored Hashem to bring Moshiach. So belief in the coming of Moshiach is one of the 13 principles of faith, Ani Ma'amin, stipulated by Maimonides, known as the Rambam, a 12th century scholar and authoritative codifier of Jewish law. Ani Ma'amin be'emuna shalema, v'yas HaMashiach. I believe with perfect faith in the coming of Moshiach, and even if he may tarry, nevertheless I anticipate his arrival every day, and this literally means every single day. Genuine belief. And if he hasn't come today, chas v'shalom, he will come tomorrow. It is said about the Chafetz Chaim, an influential rabbi of the Musa movement, a late 19th century and early 20th century halachist and posek, that he had his bags packed at all times, so that if Moshiach comes at any moment, he would be ready to go to Yerushalayim without one moment's delay. It is also said about him that he used to practice running up and down the stairs even at an old age, as he was a kohen, and he wanted to be fit and ready to ascend the Mizbeach, the altar in the temple. A story was going around WhatsApp recently about a woman, her name is Mrs. Lipska, who unfortunately lost her husband and sent a check to Abraham Fried, the singer, and to a caterer and to a family member who happens to be an orator and a rabbi, and insisted that they cash the checks and kept the money as a booking and deposit for their contribution for the big Suda Seidah, the Thanksgiving meal she will make when Moshiach comes and her husband returns. I heard recently from a fellow shlucha in Australia that her parents, who are living in Israel, were baking incessantly before Pesach this year for snacks for all those who would come up Ola Regel to the Beis HaMikdash, the Holy Temple. Moshiach were to come on Pesach. I have no doubt they and their neighbors are still baking. For even though Moshiach did not come on Pesach this year, Ani ma'amin be'emuna shalema, this does not affect their belief in the imminence of Moshiach, and that is exactly what this shlucha said. Their belief in Moshiach's arrival has not been altered in the slightest. Jews would traditionally say this Ani Ma'amin as a ritual after prayer services. Many still do. On a Friday night, in many communities, the Yigdal is sung, a prayer which expresses the 13 principles of faith, including the belief in Moshiach and resurrection. The Rambam writes in his Magnus Opus, and I quote, "Whoever does not believe in him, in Moshiach, and does not await his coming, denies not only the statements of the prophets, but also those of the Torah and of Moshe, our teacher, for the Torah attests to his coming." And then he quotes verses from Deuteronomy, Devarim, "And the Lord your God will turn your captivity and have compassion upon you, and he will return and gather you from among the nations, even if your dispersed ones are in the furthest reaches of the heavens. From there God will gather you and bring you to the land." That's a pretty intense statement from the Rambam. We don't believe in Moshiach and await for his coming. Such a strong denial in the Torah and the prophets as a whole. So firstly, I would like to highlight a few more sources from the Torah, from our prayers, and general Jewish customs that reflect Mashiach's coming as being a reality of our faith. So embedded in the story of creation is the purpose, the very purpose of creation. The Torah says, "And the Spirit of God hovered above the water." The Medrash tells us this refers to the Spirit of Moshiach, a reference to the end of times, which is the purpose of creation, to teach us that the ultimate purpose of the entire creation is Moshiach. All of our prophets in the Tanakh, from Moshe to Malachi, the last prophet, have proclaimed that there is a period in the end of days at which time Moshiach will come, and the world will enjoy the Messianic age. Moshiach is the most recurrent theme in the Tanakh. Even the prophecy of Bilam, a non-Jewish prophet, in the 5 books of Moshe, references Moshiach. Bilam predicted a star that shoots forth from Jacob and a staff that comes forth from Israel. And the Torah commentaries say this is a reference to Moshiach. We are commanded concerning the cities of refuge, the Orei Miklot, that we should add 3 cities of refuge when Hashem will expand our borders. This never happened. The Rambam says that this refers to Mashiach's times, as during that time we will expand our borders and add 3 cities. The Talmud also tells us that when a person passes away, he is subject to judgment. The first 3 questions a person is asked is, were you honest in your business dealings? Did you set aside time to study Torah? And did you actively anticipate the coming of Moshiach? Universal Jewish customs and prayers are filled with references and links to Mashiach's arrival. On Saturday night, Motzei Shabbat, Jews traditionally have a Malava Malka, a post-Shabbat meal. This is otherwise known as Seudat David Malka Mashiach, a meal that is directly associated with Mashiach's times. Now, tradition has it that this meal strengthens the bone in our body called the Luz bone. This is understood as either the coccyx or the bone where the knot of the tefillin is on the back of the head, which will be the source of regeneration of the body at the time of resurrection. The Talmud tells us that Hadrian the emperor once asked Rabbi Yeshua ben Hananiah, "From what will God resurrect man in the future times?" Rabbi Yeshua replied, "From the luz bone in the spine." Fundamental belief as part of the process of Moshiach is the resurrection of the dead. This too is one of the 13 principles of faith. I believe with perfect faith that the dead will be brought back to life when God wills it to happen. The Pirkei Avot, Ethics of Our Fathers, chapter 4, teaches those who are born are destined to die, and those who die are destined to live. Generally speaking, in Jewish law, we find there are numerous authorities, the Rambam being one of them. However, there are certain aspects of Jewish law that the Rambam is a lone authority, as others don't deal with these matters as halachic issues, and Moshiach is one of them. There are no authoritative opinions contrary to that of the Rambam when it comes to the laws of Moshiach. The Rambam clearly writes in his famous discourse on the resurrection that even though many biblical verses may be interpreted allegorically, the belief in the resurrection must be taken literally. The resurrection of the dead is hinted to in the Torah in the famous Song of the Sea, amongst other places, where the Torah says, "Oz Yashir Moshe," then Moshe will sing. But he already sang at the sea. The Gemara Sanhedrin states that from here we learn Techiyas HaMesim, resurrection of the dead. Rabbi Nissan Mengel survived the atrocities of Auschwitz. I once heard him say that despite the efforts of the Nazis to eradicate the Jewish bodies, there were piles of tiny little bones that they simply could not destroy. In his view, these bones were probably the luz bones, which the Torah tells us will never disintegrate, as they will be used in the reconstruction of the bodies at the time of resurrection. When someone is grieving, we say the famous words, "Hamakom Yenachem Eschem v'soch shara v'eletzin v'Yerushalayim." The ultimate comfort for the mourner is that just as the temple in Jerusalem will be rebuilt, so too the time will come after Mashiach's arrival when their loved one will come back and be reunited with them once again in this world. Jews have customarily been buried with their feet facing in the direction of the Jerusalem or the gates of the cemetery. Those buried in Israel are customarily buried facing the Holy Temple Mount. The theory behind this widely practiced custom is that when those who have passed away will arise at the time of the resurrection, they are conceptually ready to walk towards the Beit HaMikdash. In addition, the Jewish viewpoint on not allowing cremation directly ties in to the body being resurrected after the arrival of Moshiach. Under the chuppah, we break a glass. This custom is based on the principle that our joy is not complete whilst the temple that has been destroyed has not yet been rebuilt with the coming of Moshiach. The Birkat HaMazon, our benching after eating bread, makes reference to the coming of Eliyahu HaNavi and the request to Hashem to make us worthy to experience the days of Moshiach. In our daily prayers, we make constant reference to the coming of Moshiach. There are 60 to 80 references to Moshiach, the building of the temple, and the resurrection in the course of an average day of prayers. A quick calculation will determine that we talk about Moshiach in our prayers over 25,000 times a year. And if you say Tehillim, the Psalms, the number will be magnified. When we wake up in the morning, the first thing we recite, the first prayer we recite is Modeh Ani, a thank you to God for restoring our soul and giving us another day. This is followed by the prayer Elokai Neshama, God, the soul you infused within me, you will one day take away from me, but you will return it to me in the time to come, when all the dead will come back to life. The holiest prayer, the Amidah, otherwise known as Shemona Esrei, is split into 3 sections: praises, request, and thanksgiving. Out of the first 3 blessings, 2 deal with Moshiach. He brings redemption, Mevi Goyel Livnei B'neihem, and the next is a reference to Hashem, who resurrects the dead, Machaya HaMesim. In the middle 2, there are 5 blessings that relate directly to the coming of Moshiach. We ask Hashem to redeem us speedily, to blow the sound of the shofar that heralds in our redemption, to free us and gather in all the Jews from exile and bring us together from the four corners of the world, to restore righteousness and justice to the world, to rebuild the temple and the Davidic dynasty. And we end the Amidah with a prayer for rebuilding the temple. And we end our daily prayers with the Aleinu prayer. On that day, God will be one and his name will be one. That day is a reference to the day and period of Moshiach's arrival. So why is Moshiach so central to Judaism? Why? Some understand Moshiach as a time for reward for all the mitzvot we do. If it was just a reward, the Rambam would not have had to add an independent principle of faith that specifies reward and punishment as one of the 13 principles. Others understand Moshiach fundamentally as a time where Jews will no longer be oppressed, and we will have sovereignty over our land and ultimately be free to practice the mitzvot and to study the Torah uninhibited. There is a large belief amongst many that Moshiach has simply served as a solace, a comfort for the oppressed, the tortured, the pillaged Jews throughout history. And this belief helps our morale and gives us hope that one day it will be better, and this belief has kept the Jews going. There's a story that dates back to the shtetl that's told about a businessman who used to invest the dowry of young grooms into various business ventures. Came to pass, times were tough, and he went bankrupt, losing all the money that had been given to him for investment purposes. One young man, however, was lucky, as he had asked for his money a few weeks before. His friends asked him, "How did you know to ask for your money back? Just in time." The young man said, "One day I saw him walking into shul moaning and krechzing. When is Mashiach going to come? I figured he must be in trouble, so I decided to take the money back before it's too late." So what is Moshiach about really? In order to have an understanding about the concept of Moshiach, we need to define our purpose on earth. What is our function on earth? Some would say God has asked us to do certain things and our role is to do so. And if we fulfill those instructions, he rewards us for listening, and if we don't, he punishes us for disobeying his command. So there isn't necessarily intrinsic value to our deeds. They're not necessarily achieving something universal, other than us simply obeying God. This can cause a person potentially to become a bit unenthusiastic about it all, as there doesn't seem to be any value or purpose to the mitzvah, other than to do what Hashem asks. To give us some kind of reward, to give us possibly punishment if we disobey his word. Is that really enough of a motivation? Surely he didn't put us on this earth with the end game being to reward or punish us. How can we relate to that as intrinsically valuable to the entire universe? A person needs to feel motivated and productive, and people have an innate need to feel as if they are making a difference to someone or something or some cause outside of themselves. If it's all about us, we're left with feeling a sense of emptiness. The story is told of a man in prison, and he's subjected to slave labor. Every day he's told to spend hours turning a lever on the wall, which has millstones on the other side. With every turn of the lever, he is grinding wheat. So to motivate himself, he envisions all the poor and the hungry and the needy people who will benefit from his hard work. Time has come for him to leave the prison, and the first place he decides to visit is the other side of the wall, to finally check out that wheat mill. To his horror, there is nothing on the other side of the wall other than a piece of a metal pipe leading nowhere. In a state of shock, he fainted. Every human being wants to know that they are making a difference. So there is a concept of tikkun olam. This gives purpose. What is the essence of tikkun olam? What is the purpose of rectifying the world? Extending beyond ourselves and our own egos to help humanity and change the world. The purpose of creation is for man to introduce godliness into the material reality, transforming it to holiness, creating a home for Hashem in an unimaginable locale. This is called Dira B'Tachtonim. This idea is based on a medrash. The medrash asks, why did Hashem create the world? And answers, he desired a dwelling place for himself in the lowest of realms. So a lot has been written and developed on this idea, as it lies in the very heart of our mission on earth. God wanted there to be a challenge. He wanted a place where his presence would not be readily perceivable or available, a place that would look like it operates on its own terms and knows no God. And in that very place, Hashem wanted his presence to be felt, to be revealed. And in that very place, Hashem desired that a great light would overcome the darkness. Hashem wanted us humans to make this happen. Hashem wanted us humans to turn this earthly world into heaven on earth, to perceive the unified link in all of existence, and to synthesize the spiritual and physical realms. So God invested intensely spiritual souls into material bodies. The soul goes through a tough period while it's in the body, where it's no longer able to properly perceive godliness. However, with hard work and overcoming challenges and choosing light over darkness and right over wrong, good over bad, we're able to achieve greater heights than before the soul's descent by working with the body and transforming the darkness of this world into light. This would reveal God's essence on earth. This would transform the world into an abode for Hashem, a world where his presence is palpable, is evident, a world in which we humans will ultimately perceive the truth of reality. Failing to understand this truth is missing the whole point of creation. It is not just about rectifying the world for the sake of making the world a more comfortable and balanced place to live in. It is much, much more than that. Each one of us is actively playing our unique role, an individual role, in fulfilling the very purpose of why the world is created. Every time we do a mitzvah, even though we do not see it, we are flooding the world with godly light. The world is absorbing intense spiritual energy. All of this energy and this light that's created and accumulated by the efforts of generations through the millennia will reach a climax and be revealed when Moshiach comes. And at that time, the purpose of creation will finally come to fruition. The goal of the world, openly recognizing Hashem and creating a dwelling place for him, will be accomplished, and we will live with this new reality, a more godly world, a world full of light, a world full of goodness, full of holiness, full of joy. Hence, building the temple, making a home for God literally and in each and every heart, is the symbol of the concept of Moshiach. This is precisely why we have to do whatever we can to bring Mashiach and demand from Hashem to bring Mashiach, and not be complacent and wait for Hashem to do it in his time, whenever he chooses. Because Hashem specifically wants Mashiach to come through our prayers and our efforts. We need to be the ones to bring Mashiach. Not even the tzaddikim, not even the righteous. Regular, ordinary people like us need to actively put in our effort. So Mashiach is in fact the mission statement of the Jewish nation, and actually the mission statement for all of mankind. Therefore, we can't not talk about Mashiach. We can't not be obsessed with the concept of Mashiach. It would be like a soldier going to out to battle without understanding his goal in battle. A tzaddik, a righteous, holy leader who can visualize what the world can become. A tzaddik who loves each and every one of us unconditionally, who wants the best for us and can visualize clearly the quality of life we are missing out on, materially and spiritually. A tzaddik whose life is centered around this mission statement. How can he not be obsessed with the coming of Moshiach? The Rebbe, who was a tzaddik and prophet in his generation, in this generation, visualized where we are headed and saw the imminence of Moshiach's arrival. He passionately dedicated his life towards making Moshiach a reality, and he encouraged his followers to do the same. The Rebbe said, people often say he's a dreamer and that he's just simply not realistic, that he spends too much time talking about dreams. In fact, said the Rebbe, the opposite is true. The current state of galut, of exile, is compared to a dream, in which a person's sense of perception can tolerate the most contradictory and irrational things. In other words, our current reality is a dream, while the world of Moshiach is the true reality. In a single moment, we can all wake from the dream of galut, of exile, and open our eyes to the true reality of our existence, the perfect world of Moshiach. The Rebbe insisted that the accumulation of our collective efforts can and will make Moshiach come in our lifetime. He told us that our generation are compared to midgets on giants' shoulders. We can see further, achieve even more than the giants, our ancestors. They were giants, but we are standing on their shoulders, all of their good deeds. And the mission of this generation was to finalize those finishing touches. In the words of the previous Chabad Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, the Rebbe's father-in-law, we just needed to polish those buttons, the final touches. And the Rebbe said during his leadership that the buttons have now been polished. All the deadlines have been achieved. We need to open up our eyes and realize that the time of our redemption has arrived. We need to change our mentality and realize that the world is changing. Big things are happening. The energy of the world is shifting. I received a message last night, a couple of nights ago actually, from a friend who is part of my community. She's deeply spiritual and she's intuitive, and she wrote, "Can you feel how the vibration of the air all around us has raised? There is a global uplift of energy, and it is so beautiful and about time." And I think if I said that to anyone else, they would think I was certifiable. Friends, we need to open up our eyes, heighten our senses, and feel what is happening around us. So automatically, when the spiritual awareness shifts, when we will live with an elevated perception of reality, when the world will be filled with the knowledge of Hashem, there will no longer be evil, or jealousy, or war, or fragmentation, or resentment, or anything to be upset about. When God's presence is revealed in this world, generated from the energy in the new Beit HaMikdash that will be built, the entire world will be transformed from the better. The wolf shall dwell with the lamb, according to the prophets. The lion shall lie with the sheep. Our enemies will become our friends. The whole world will live in unity and with a collective goal of simply bringing more goodness into their lives and into the lives of others. And all of that without the distraction of challenges, be it financial, health, or even death, God forbid, itself. Moshiach is not about escapism. Moshiach is about revelation, about transformation. The world was created in 6 days. Each day represents another millennia. The 7th day, Shabbat, represents the Messianic era, which has to happen, according to the Gemara, by the year 6000. However, we are now way past the deadline. In fact, the Rebbe said it's currently almost Shabbos. It's time to bring in Shabbos, a time we taste the food of Shabbos. We light the candles before Shabbos. Moshiach is not going to come in the year 6000. We will usher in the Messianic era, lighting those candles, bringing the energy of Moshiach into this world way before 6000. In the Rebbe's view, this will happen in our lifetime. The Rebbe made observations, particularly during the years 1990 to 1992, where he stated that the world was entering into a redemptive reality. We just need to become sensitive to this reality. So someone called me yesterday and asked me, is it petty to be renovating my home if Moshiach is coming any moment? Whilst her home is in desperate need of renovation, will she even live in her home if we'll be living in Israel soon? Is it petty for her to be putting energy into her home now? So to answer that, some have a basic misunderstanding as to what this new reality will bring. So these people think and they envision that their current lives will be wiped out, and they wonder what's going to happen to all my prior accomplishments, those painfully constructed businesses. Or what about our personal relationships? Will they be rendered meaningless? Will I no longer have my home, my job, my status? So the Hebrew word for redemption is geula. The Hebrew word for exile, our current state, is gola. The only difference is geula has one extra letter, the letter aleph. This refers to Alufai Shel Olam, the master of the world, Hashem. In the Geula, the era of Moshiach, the aleph of our present day life will come to light. Everything we have and everything we are will not be negated. Rather, the very elements that make up our lives today will be enhanced and perfected by the aleph, by the appreciation of the godly potential that lies within it. So, no need to worry. We'll still have our cars, our homes, our possessions, our status, our achievements, but we will relate to them and everything we have and appreciate their worth and purpose in a much more profound manner. Materialism will no longer obstruct godliness. It will become holy, precisely what it is meant to be, a vehicle for goodness and a vehicle for holiness. So I advise this woman, absolutely go ahead with fixing your home. Your home is your miniature temple. Greet Moshiach with a beautiful home, as this is the home you will live in when Moshiach is here. Your home will be transported to Israel with you. And you will use your additional space in your home for productive purposes, to host guests, to host shiurim with happiness and with health. Before we bench, before we say the Birkat HaMazon, we say Shir HaMa'alot, B'shuv Hashem et Shivat Zion hayinu k'cholmin. It's a psalm from King David. When Hashem returns, the returnees of Zion, we will be like dreamers. When Moshiach comes, it will be such a beautiful, wonderful, blissful experience. Our past will feel like a dream. Imagine every single pleasure you could possibly conceive of in your entire lifetime and bottle that up into one moment. All together, the pleasure of one moment of Mashiach's times far surpasses all imaginable pleasures of a lifetime. Enjoying our lives now is like a child whose biggest dream is to receive an ice cream, a lollipop. An adult has far greater dreams. It will be ludicrous to conceive of an adult that dreams of receiving a lollipop as an ultimate reward. The life we will experience far surpasses any form of pleasure we can ever experience, we can ever even dream of, conceive of. So from a practical viewpoint, how will this all transpire? What will the world actually look like before and after Moshiach comes? What are the pre-Moshiach signs according to the Rambam and the Talmud? And what is the criteria for Moshiach himself? So for that, please join me next week. But I would like to just share one more thought and one story with you before I end. There is currently a lot of hype and a lot of talk about Moshiach. Obviously, the world is currently going through huge challenges with the coronavirus. Again, more on that next week. And I've been encouraging my communities to strengthen their belief in Moshiach. So I actually got a call, actually not, it was a text, it was a WhatsApp message from a woman in my community, from a Chabad woman from the Chabad community actually, and she wrote to me and she said, Fruma, I'm really nervous. And I said, what are you nervous about? She said, all this talk about Moshiach, I'm just really nervous. I said, why? Are you afraid of what's going to happen when he comes? She said, no, I'm afraid to have high hopes. I'm afraid to elevate my hopes and to set myself up for disappointment if he doesn't come. So I said to her, I totally understand where you're coming from. It's a very valid concern. I get it. However, besides from all the prophecies and signs of Mashiach's coming that we're currently experiencing, that I'll address next week, we have a promise from the Rebbe and many Gedolei Yisrael, great Jewish leaders in our times, that we are living in Messianic times, that Mashiach will come very soon. We will not be disappointed because we, as Chabad Hasidim, are relying on the promise and prophecy of the Rebbe, whose prophetic words were always proven true, time and time again. The only question is, how will we greet him? Rather, save your nervousness for that. So there's a story I often repeat of two brothers. And these two brothers were in a big fight. And they didn't talk to each other for many years. I guess by the end of however many years, they probably forgot why they didn't even talk to each other. So one brother was making a chasana, one brother was making a wedding. And he sent an invitation to the brother that he didn't, doesn't speak to, and hoping and praying that his brother will get over his faribel, his brokus, and he'd come to his wedding. No response. Nothing. Not a mazel tov, not a response. Absolutely nothing. Anyway, comes closer and closer to the wedding, and he's hoping and he's thinking, maybe I'll hit nothing. The day of the wedding, he's so heartsore, he's so sad that his only sibling will not be sharing his simcha with him. He comes up with a plan. And he decides to take the whole wedding entourage and the music and the chas and kala and everybody and walk past his brother's home. And his brother's in his home, and he starts to hear this beautiful music coming his way, and he's listening. He's, what's going on? What's happening? And opens up the window, and he sees there's a whole procession, a joy. It's a wedding, and suddenly he sees his brother. And at that very moment, his heart just melts, and all his harshness and all the barriers just left, they just disappeared. And he burst out crying, and he just ran downstairs, and he ran outside, and he ran and he hugged his brother, and he started dancing, and he's just participating in this simcha. He just really was just reveling in the moment was just so important and so special. But suddenly he looks down at himself and he sees, I'm still in my pajamas. I thought I didn't even get dressed. Well, I guess this is the question we need to ask ourselves. We need to ask ourselves, how are we going to be dressed? The procession is coming. Moshiach is coming. There is no question about the fact that Moshiach is coming. How are we going to greet him? Let's not greet him in our pajamas. The Rambam says in Hilchas Teshuvah, in the Laws of Teshuvah, chapter 3, it is necessary for every man to hold himself in a light of being evenly balanced between innocence and guilt, and look upon the entire world as if evenly balanced between innocence and guilt. Thus, if he commits one sin, he will overbalance himself and the whole world to the side of guilt and be a cause of its destruction. But if he performs one duty, behold, he will overbalance himself and the whole world to the side of virtue and bring about his own and their salvation. Let us not underestimate our actions. Sometimes we think, it's just me. Who am I? I'm just one person in the scheme of the whole universe. How will my mezuzah, my visit to the mikveh, my act of kindness, my learning of Torah, what I put into my mouth or sometimes allow to go out of my mouth, will that all make such a difference really in the big scheme of things? Well, it actually does make a difference. Let's be ready to greet Moshiach with dignity and with our souls open to receiving all the blessings and spiritual revelations that are awaiting this world. And let's not think of ourselves as small. Let's not hesitate to do that one more mitzvah, because your mitzvah, that one mitzvah, could be the very mitzvah that changes the world and tips the scales. If you have any questions and are on Facebook Live, please feel free to write them in the comments and I'll either address them later on Facebook or in my talk next week. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a lovely evening or a good day wherever you find yourselves.